Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back when you use it to buy the new Apple Vision Pro or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.50% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Apple Card and Savings by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos. But it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia. Identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, and automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations, so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. This podcast contains explicit language, but it's probably not my fault. Don't worry, I'll talk to the other hosts. Hi, I'm Josh Levin, and this is Hang Up and Listen for the week of January 29th, 2024. On this week's show, we'll talk about how the Chiefs and 49ers made it to the Super Bowl, what we learned about Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson, and whether Detroit Lions fans should be biting off Dan Campbell's kneecaps. Then the Washington Post's Ben Golliver will join us to discuss Luka Doncic's 73-point game, Joel Embiid's 70-pointer, and whether somebody in the NBA is going to break 100. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm the author of The Queen. And like LSU Tiger turned Baltimore Raven Patrick Queen, I will not be attending the Super Bowl. Also in D.C. is Stefan Fatsis. He's the author of the books Word Freak, A Few Seconds of Panic, and Wild and Outside. How many Super Bowls have you been to, Stefan?
I've only attended one. I've played in none.
Which one did you attend?
I attended John Elway flipping like a whirly gig in San Diego against the Green Bay Packers in 1997.
For the Journal?
Yeah.
Do you remember what you wrote?
I did. I did a feature story leading up to the game about retired NFL players cashing in on Super Bowl week.
Love it. Classic Journal sports. Not about the game at all.
I didn't have to write anything about the game. It was pre-daily Wall Street Journal sports page. So, yeah.
With us from the Bay Area, it's podcast host, writer, and Power Eye enthusiast, Joel Anderson. Have you ever been to the Super Bowl?
I've not. I did attend Super Bowl festivities the year that it was in New York, because I was at BuzzFeed News at the time and on the sports desk. So I don't even know if I had tickets to go to the game, but I got to cover, Media Day and all that stuff. Little Terrio was there. If people remember Little Terrio, the internet sensation from 10, 11 years ago.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
You don't remember Little Terrio?
Based on Stefan's expression, he also has no idea what you're talking about.
I do not.
I was going to put out a call to our listeners, but I'm just thinking there might not be that many people that are familiar with Little Terrio. But anyway, if you guys find out who Little Terrio is, tweet at us.
I'll have to educate myself.
That's right.
We want to thank our Slate Plus members. I'm guessing none of whom are playing in the Super Bowl, but maybe I'm wrong about that. And this week, as we do every week, we have a bonus segment for those subscribers. Coming up, we're going to talk about the writer Jeff Pearlman's words of wisdom to young journalists that they should make themselves indispensable. Is that good advice? We will weigh in. If you want to hear that and bonus segments on other Slate shows, get ad-free listening for all Slate podcasts, and support us, you need to be a Slate Plus member. To sign up, go to slate.com/hangupplus. That's slate.com/hangupplus. With 6.5 minutes to go in the third quarter and his team up 24-10, Detroit Lions cornerback Kindle Vildor, amazing name, tracked a deep ball from San Francisco 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy directly into his face mask, at which point it bounced off and into the hands of Niners wide receiver Brandon Ayuk. It was the first big turning point in a game that swerved wildly in the second half, with San Francisco overcoming a 17-point halftime deficit to win 34-31 and clinch a spot in the Super Bowl, where they'll play the Kansas City Chiefs. After the NFC Championship game, Ayuk explained to Aaron Andrews of Fox how that catch happened.
Before the game, a ladybug landed on my shoe. And y'all know what that means. So that's all I can say, because other than that, I don't know. Just great luck. God was with us today. Great win. Bang, bang, Niner gang. It's crazy.
First of all, bang, bang, Niner gang. Second of all, Joel, did anything on your shoe help you predict the outcome of Sunday's games? And what did you make of the 49ers' big comeback and the Lions' shocking second half collapse?
The only thing I got on my shoe on Sunday was playground sand, and maybe it was apropos because maybe the Lions were seemingly running in sand in the second half or something like that. But, you know, I was thinking about this as the game ended, and I realized Fox had stopped showing scenes from Ford Field as the NC Championship game wound down, right? And overall, like, I have some experience with this. As our listeners know, I was a Houston Oilers fan. And every year after some playoff disappointment, you figure that your favorite team will run it back next year. Like, why not? You know, you can talk yourselves into this every off season. Your team has solid quarterback, young skill talent, one of the best offensive lines in the league, a coach who has led tremendous improvement every season, and a front office that's proven to be one of the best of the league. So it's reasonable to assume that your teams are just going to run it back. Like, if you're young and talented like the Lions, why wouldn't they? You could do it just like the 49ers did. But Lions fans and Oilers fans know that football doesn't work like that. And in fact, I'm old enough that I can remember the 1991 Lions team, the last one to advance that far in the playoffs. And they had Eric Kramer, Barry Sanders, Herman Moore, Chris Spielman, Benny Blades, Ray Crockett, all those dudes. And they played close in the NFC Championship game and fell apart in the second half. And the thought was, they're really young. They'll be back. And the next year they went 5-11, and it took them until this year to win another playoff game. So when that game ended in Santa Clara last night, I just felt a wave of sadness wash over me. Like, that's not a loss that's going to be part of a redemption story. That's a loss that haunts the franchise for a really long time. And everything was lining up for them. It was gone. And again, a lot of teams go through this. Remember those Mark Sanchez Jets teams, those Phillip Rivers and LaDainian San Diego teams. Remember that year, Blake Bortles and the Jaguars seemed really young and really talented, and they almost beat the Tom Brady and the Pats, and you're like, oh, they'll probably be back. Like, they've got enough young talent to get back, and then it never happened. So I just thought, man, the Lions caught a lot of bad breaks from a couple of those drops on 4th and 3rd down, that Brock Purdy pass that bounced off Vildor's helmet and into the arms of Brandon Ayuk, you know, our ladybug guy. And I know we're going to talk about 4th down conversion, Stefan, but I just feel like there was so much else that was working against the Lions on Sunday that it's kind of reductive to focus it all on what Dan Campbell decided to do on 4th down, because it just seemed like it slowly kind of got away from them down the stretch.
Kind of quickly got away from them. I mean, they beat their asses in the first half. I mean, they dominated the 49ers in the first half. It was 24-7 at the break. The Lions were running at will. They made a first down rushing on 3rd and 12. They threw on 3rd and 18 for a first down. They were just simply dominant. I was sitting on my couch saying, oh my God, they're going to blow them out. And the second half just did not go that way, obviously. The 49ers adjusted. They played better. And as you said, Joel, the Lions made a lot of mistakes. And whether it's fair or not to reduce the criticism of Detroit to the 4th down calls that Dan Campbell made, or whether it's fair to say they dropped a bunch of passes, they got a couple of bad breaks, I think it's all part of the equation. I mean, those 4th down calls were head-scratching, to say the least, and maybe defensible in an analytical vacuum, but situationally, they just didn't make sense.
Oh, that's interesting, Stefan, because most people and the stuff that we've been reading have kind of gone in the opposite direction in defending the Lions' 4th down decisions. And if you look at the context, I think there are a lot of reasons why they were defensible or even smart decisions. The Lions had converted 17 of 20 chances this year when it was 4th and 3 or less in opponent's territory. Their kicker isn't amazing. It's not like a Justin Tucker type figure. So Badgley very well could have missed those field goals. And then, I mean, they didn't know this necessarily going in to the play, but like on the first one, Josh Reynolds just dropped the ball. And then on the second one, it seemed like that was actually really good 49ers defense, where Steve Wilkes, the defensive coordinator, tricked Jared Goff into thinking they were playing man and they were actually playing zone. But so, yeah, what's your kind of rationale for thinking that it was a bad decision or not as defensible as everybody else is saying?
I don't know. I think my rationale is that you can kind of throw out the aggregate regular season statistics because of the situation that the Lions were in. They had an opportunity to go up 3 scores when they went for it and failed the first time. They would have been up 17 points instead of 14 points. And then the second opportunity, Campbell chose to go for it on 4th and 3 instead of attempting a 48-yard field goal by Mike Badgley that would have tied the game. San Francisco went down the field. They were up 10, up 2 scores with very little time left. So I think situationally, I think there was a conservative argument to be made, not even conservative, that you go up 3 scores if you kick the field goal early in the third quarter, you tie the game instead of giving San Francisco the opportunity to go up 2 scores later in the game. And the criticism of Mike Badgley, the kicker, seemed a little misplaced to me. I mean, a lot of the numbers that have been thrown around have been Badgley's career numbers. And he has become a much better kicker over the course of his career, as have most NFL kickers. In the last 3 seasons, including this year's playoffs, Badgley made 19 of 23 kicks from between 40 and 49 yards, 83%. That's pretty good. The overall average, overall percentage make rate in the NFL this season was about 85%.
I guess it's a 48 field goal. The 48-yard field goal is
in good weather conditions. This is not like they were playing in 20 degrees in Baltimore. They were
under more
the
pressure
Bay
than
Area.
he's ever been in his entire life.
Sure.
And I think they say that the decision to kick is like statistically marginally more defensible than kicking it under that circumstance. And so I see what you're saying, Stefan, because I thought about it earlier in terms of like, all right, well, the thing about kicking a field goal is that there's not the huge momentum swing that it is when a team gets off the field after a 4th down conversion. And I know that that's like, that just sounds like voodoo compared to like the analytical analysis of football. But like, we've all watched enough football to know that when a team gets a stop on 4th down, it's to the extent that you believe in momentum or whatever it is, like, confidence, whatever, it can fuel a team. And it certainly seemed like the 49ers got a boost when the Lions had to turn it over on downs. But I also think that like the Lions got here because of that sort of play calling all year long.
You adjust. So it's a different situation.
If he had walked away from making those sorts of decisions and not showing faith in his team to make those 4th down conversions, it would totally be the antithesis of everything we liked about the Lions and everything we respect about Dan
what
Campbell.
I would have respected more is like making the Super Bowl is the thing that you would have respected Dan Campbell for more. What's more aggressive, being ahead 27-10 or 24-10? Making San Francisco score 3 times or letting them score 2 touchdowns and tying the game? They erased that deficit in 8 minutes. Boom.
Look, I think Benjamin Solak of The Ringer made the argument or made the point that for Detroit, the 2 plays in the game that if you look at kind of win expectation or point expectation cost them the most were Jahmyr Gibbs's fumble, which came immediately after, they cut the lead to 24-17. And then the Ayuk reception off Vildor's face mask, which is what allowed them to get within 7 points. I think this is just a classic case of where people argue about coaching decisions because it could have gone the other way. It's just like you can put yourself in Dan Campbell's shoes. It's not really possible to argue of like, man, Jahmyr Gibbs really shouldn't have fumbled. It's just a thing that happened. But, was the chance that Josh Reynolds catches that ball on that 4th down greater or less than 83%? Like the cliche, right? I can just hear a color analyst in my head say that he catches that 99 out of 100 times. Is that actually true? Maybe he catches it 87 out of 100 times. I don't know. But I think ultimately it's like a break-even thing. Again, look at the various models. It is like basically 50-50. And then it's, do you trust Dan Campbell to know his team and the situation, or do you trust Stefan Fatsis to know what's what makes more sense for the Lions? I think I tend to like go towards Joel's argument. If you do something all year, they'd gone for it, I think 20 out of 24 times, and then you like completely change during the playoffs, I think the players would be like, whoa, that seems weird. Like, is he like getting more conservative? Like, does he not actually believe that we can make it? And like, you can't calculate those things, right? And I think, again, if it's like a 50-50 proposition, it just doesn't honestly seem worth getting mad about it either way or like arguing about it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I just think it's, it's interesting. I mean, I think the thing is that a lot of people are focusing on Dan Campbell and the Lions right now because we have 2 more weeks to deal with the 49ers, right? And so you kind of want to, wrap a season up in a neat bow and say, well, what should the Lions have done? This is why they lost. And the reality is they lost for a combination of reasons. And some of them is that the 49ers in the second half were the team that everybody thought they were all year long. I mean, they played like the number 1 seed down the stretch. I mean, Brock Purdy, as infuriating as he is, came up, and made enough plays. Like, I don't want to give him that help. I mean, look, we all know that the helmet catch is bullshit, right? Like the Brandon Ayuk thing, right? I mean, like, and that was totally rocket fuel for the 49ers. It just seemed like everything started rolling for them after that. But like, when you're a good team, sometimes you catch those breaks. Like if you're still in the game, you benefit from those breaks. And, Christian McCaffrey was as good as I can remember him being. He only had 90 yards, but like it felt like every yard he rushed for was important in that game, that it like proved some sort of point.
And Deebo Samuel had been out and came back and played great.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, like, at the end of the day, I mean, the 49ers showed us who they were. Like, they were as good as everybody said they were. And they're certainly a worthy Super Bowl team. And sometimes the breaks just don't go your way, Lions fans. And, I'm sorry. I hope it comes your way again. But let's be honest. We know we know what your history is.
Up next, we're going to talk about how the Chiefs beat the Ravens.
Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back when you use it to buy the new Apple Vision Pro or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.50% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Apple Card and Savings by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you're driving, cooking, or doing laundry, Progressive knows the podcasts you listen to go best when they're bundled with another activity. Much like how their Progressive home and auto policies go best when they're bundled. Having these 2 policies together makes taking care of your insurance easier and could help you save, too. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save nearly $800 on average. That's a whole lot of savings and protection for your favorite podcast listening activities, like going on a road trip, cooking dinner, and even hitting the home gym. Yep, your home and your car are even easier to protect when you bundle your insurance together. Find your perfect combo. Get a home and car insurance quote at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $793 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary. In the other game on Sunday, the AFC Championship, Patrick Mahomes went on the road and beat Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens 17-10. Stefan, it was a pretty exciting first quarter from an offensive standpoint. Long drive by the Chiefs, and then Lamar Jackson had an amazing scramble and then a long touchdown pass to Zay Flowers. Then after that, this game was a slog. The Chiefs did go on another, I think, 9-minute drive after that. That was the only other touchdown in the game. But I guess we can start in one of 2 ways. Like Patrick Mahomes, that guy, 4 Super Bowls now in his first 6 seasons. Pretty incredible. And then Lamar Jackson, another playoff disappointment.
Yeah, Mahomes is now 14-3 in the postseason. He's already only behind Joe Montana, 16 wins in playoffs, and Tom Brady, 35. Mahomes is not 30 yet. He will start 4 Super Bowls before turning 30. No one has done that before. I mean, what Pat Mahomes has shown us, Joel, is that he is the best quarterback in a league that has a lot of really good quarterbacks. I mean, look at what the Chiefs did in the last 2 weeks. They went to Buffalo. Josh Allen was fantastic. They still managed to win. They went to Baltimore. Lamar Jackson was okay after an absolutely spectacular MVP season, and we can get into some of Jackson's numbers over the course of this year and how he did that. But the Chiefs go to Baltimore, and Patrick Mahomes does just enough to win this game, a low-scoring game, which none of us were expecting, especially after that first quarter. That alone, I mean, in a season that we were saying, 6, 8, 9 weeks ago, Chiefs don't look that great. Looks like it might be Lamar Jackson's year. Or, whoa, what a final stretch run by Josh Allen and the Bills. And here we are again with Mahomes and all of his TV commercials back in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, man, it's just crazy because, I mean, the conversation before the game was that this is one of the best, not just one of the best Raven teams of recent vintage, but one of the best NFL teams of recent vintage. Like, they were dominant. Like, they beat up playoff teams this year. Both of the teams in the NFC Championship game, like, they destroyed, right? And so it was reasonable to think that this was their year. And this is what I kind of come back to, like, it connects to the Lions fans for me, is that, when will the Ravens have it better than this? They're at home. This is probably the worst Chiefs team in the last 6 years that Mahomes has been starting. You've got a guy that's the presumptive 2-time MVP, one of the best defenses ever, home field advantage, and you lose, man. And not only that, like, I don't know about you guys, and Josh, you tell me, I never felt like the Ravens were in control of the game. And in fact, I thought, like, people are saying, oh, the Ravens, shut down the Chiefs in the second half. And I think that there's something to that. But I also think that the Chiefs just stopped taking chances. They were like, you know what? We're choking them out right now. Let's not do the Dan Campbell thing. Let's not do anything that might, give them a spark, give them a needless break. Let's not take any chances because our defense is handling them right now. And it just it just looked like the Ravens went quietly into the night. It didn't seem like they had as much fight as you'd expect from a team that was allegedly as great as they were, to me.
Both teams' early touchdowns came after fourth down conversions. I guess they just should have punted in both cases, and it would have been 10-3 instead of 17-10. But, this game is a testament to what even the greatest quarterbacks in the game can, in this era, still be stymied by great defenses. Two of the best, I think the two best statistically in the league. And I think there's something to the fact that the Chiefs played differently with the lead and seeing how effective their game plan, Steve Spagnuolo famously, shut down the 2007 Patriots with the Giants, just really seemed to flummox the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. Bill Barnwell's analysis for ESPN was interesting because he kind of split between giving credit to the Chiefs for taking away the intermediate passing game and doing, all sorts of things that they're able to do because they have a stronger secondary than, for instance, the Houston Texans. But there was also, I think, a point that he made that was really striking to me. Gus Edwards had 3 carries. I mean, the whole kind of superpower of the Ravens offense, Stefan, and the superpower of a quarterback who can run the ball is that he makes the entire running game better. I mean, the Ravens, ever since Lamar Jackson came in the league, have had an amazing running game. And the Bills were running the ball all over the Chiefs last week.
So I see Brian Baldinger on Twitter mention that the Ravens only called 2 runs for Lamar Jackson all game long. 2. Like, he had more runs than that because those are scrambles off pressure or whatever. But they only called 2 runs for the most dynamic quarterback running threat in the league. So it's clear that they got out of their game pretty quickly.
Yeah, and Josh Allen, we'll recall, ran, I don't know how many, but it did seem like there were designed runs for Allen that worked the previous week in Buffalo.
I mean, the contrast between the running by Lamar Jackson and by Brock Purdy was pretty stark. I mean, Purdy would go back, not find anyone open, and run for a first down. Lamar would go back, look. And then by the time he tried to scramble, he was running for his life. Like there were very few instances for, both of you guys where it seemed like Lamar didn't see his first read and then took off.
Right. Barnwell pointed out that Jackson held the ball for more than 4 seconds on 13 dropbacks. He was 4 of 9 on those, but also 4 sacks. That seemed very uncharacteristic. And I don't know whether that was designed, whether that was nerves, but something felt off about Jackson's willingness to take off, exploit the gap between the line and the secondary, and do what he does.
Right. And can't we just say, there is reason to critique Lamar? I mean, he is the 2-time MVP and whatever, but the Chiefs, by all rights, had the second best defense in the league all year long. And they were really not that far behind the Ravens, if you tally up, all their season's numbers or whatever. So it is just possible that Lamar Jackson and the Ravens played against a defense that was, a class ahead of anybody else they'd faced all year long. And we saw that, right? And again, the subtext of this is that, and everybody's kind of been talking about it on the internet, is that, Lamar Jackson is black. I think if you all watch football, you may have noticed that. And the criticism about him and his ability to play NFL quarterback from the pocket has always been an ongoing argument, a debate. The narrative is that, this guy is sort of he's an athlete playing quarterback and not a quarterback who's an athlete. And so I think, there are people, including me, I have to admit my bias here, that I don't like the criticism overly harshly in public, but facts are facts is that the Chiefs were a much better team. They had the advantage on defense, and that Lamar didn't play well. And actually, I was looking up, I don't believe in quarterback wins or whatever as a stat, but man, Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, they've got more playoff wins. That Baker Mayfield has as many playoff wins as Lamar Jackson, man. So it's just, when you think about that stuff, it's just you don't want to. I don't believe that Lamar Jackson will never get it done, but he gave a lot more life to the critics who say that style of football won't work against the elite teams, I think. And that's kind of the disappointing thing, at least for me.
And let's also not forget, Josh, that the Ravens also shot themselves in their foot. There were a lot of penalties, a too many men on the field penalty and unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. And of course, Zay Flowers, with inches from tying the game, did the thing that football players are taught not to do, and which we saw the previous week happen, which is dive for the goal line with the ball outstretched.
But it was a great play by L'Jarius Sneed.
L'Jarius Sneed, amazing play by L'Jarius Sneed.
Unbelievable.
After having been taunted by Zay Flowers mere seconds before. I mean, the Chiefs had a touchdown called back on what was kind of a bullshit holding penalty on a screen pass. I mean, we can play this game all day. I think if you play that game back, 10 times, I think the Chiefs probably won 9 of them, just based on, I don't think this was a game where it was breaks really did in the Ravens. And I think context always matters. I grew up, or I was an adult, but I saw Drew Brees lead a whole bunch of Saints teams to 7-9 seasons because the defense was trash. And then I saw them do really well when they had a great defense. I mean, this was a Chiefs team that was buoyed by their defense. But I would also say that context doesn't particularly matter to Patrick Mahomes compared to every other quarterback in the league. I mean, the whole storyline this year was that his receivers couldn't catch. Marquez Valdez-Scantling makes a great catch on that last. But that was maybe I guess Rashee Rice made a few plays, but this was a bad Chiefs receiving core. You saw what happened to Tom Brady in his final years in New England when they had a bad receiving core. I mean, nobody except, it seems, Patrick Mahomes can, be immune from contact. So we can say all of that stuff about Lamar Jackson, but if you're, what he's going to be a multiple time MVP and you're going to be compared to Patrick Mahomes. He just hasn't been as good. Whether it's because he isn't as good or just hasn't played as well when it matters. It would be nice if you were in the NFC, because that way you wouldn't have to go up against, I don't think we'd be talking about Brock Purdy being in the Super Bowl. It's ridiculous to me that the 49ers have been favored. I'm just having a hard time imagining Purdy going up against that Chiefs defense and us coming out at the end being like, wow, Brock Purdy really made the Chiefs and Steve Spagnuolo look stupid. He really outplayed them out there.
Or going up against the Ravens defense, or going up against the Bills. I mean, arguably the three best teams in the NFL were in the AFC this year. And, you mentioned the receivers, Josh. Travis Kelce did not have a great season by Travis Kelce standards. He played phenomenally on Sunday.
And throughout the playoffs. All right, my final thought is, does anybody remember this from 2003? I think what we've had here is little social concern in the NFL. The media has been very desirous that a black quarterback do well. There's little hope invested in McNabb, and he got a lot of credit for the performance of this team that he didn't deserve. The defense carried this team. That was Rush Limbaugh on ESPN about Donovan McNabb in 2003, and the context was that Donovan McNabb had been, I'm reading from the ESPN article about this, had been to 3 straight Pro Bowls and 2 consecutive NFC Championship games and was runner-up for NFL MVP in his first full season as a starter. Still, commentator Rush Limbaugh saw fit to question the quarterback's credentials. And based on what I saw from the Clay Travises of the world in 2024, the perspective, even though we've just come such a tremendous distance in terms of who plays quarterback in the NFL in the last 20 years, the commentary is very similar about how, the media just really wants Lamar Jackson to do well. And he's this, multiple time MVP, but, it's all because of, the context and the team that he's been good and he's just overrated. It just struck me as a pretty interesting parallel, and that it shows kind of how far we've come, but also how kind of exactly the same the analysis is.
Yeah, I mean, that regressive analysis has always been there. It's the same kind of analysis that, again, had suggested Lamar Jackson should run routes at the NFL Combine when he was, the Heisman Trophy winner, right? So that'll never go away. And I mean, that's why, people like me are going to be extra sensitive when you criticize Lamar Jackson, because sometimes I just want to know where it's going to go.
But that's the thing, right? It's that not every black athlete is going to be amazing in every big game. I guess it's one way to put it. And I think the grain of truth is that I think those of us who recognize racism in the way that this position has been discussed and analyzed and opportunities have been given, we do root for Lamar Jackson or a guy like Donovan McNabb, but we root for them because they're great, and great players lose every fucking year. That's just what happens in sports. And so there's always going to be fodder for, whether it's, Colin Kaepernick lost in the Super Bowl or whatever. There's always going to be a black quarterback or a black athlete who, conservative white people don't like. And that's always, till the end of time, it's going to provide this kind of fodder.
Well, I also believe in cross-racial solidarity. And who else I defended vigorously from criticisms that they were bad in the playoffs and they weren't cracked up to what they were? Everybody's favorite Republican, Peyton Manning. So, that used to dog him for years as well. So, yeah, I mean, people can be dumb across racial lines when it comes to this. But with Lamar, there's a history that comes with it. So, yeah, man, I hate that he lost. But, hey, man, if you still want to root for a black quarterback, still got some Pat Mahomes, you know what I'm saying? And we'll see Pat Mahomes Sr. So there's still something for all of us coming up here.
Up next, the Washington Post's Ben Golliver on Luka, Embiid, and whether we're going to get a 100-point game in the NBA. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you Understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia. Identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks. And automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations, so you could be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back when you use it to buy the new Apple Vision Pro or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.50% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Apple Card and Savings by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
On March 2nd, 1962, in Hershey, Pennsylvania, Wilt Chamberlain, then of the Philadelphia Warriors, scored 100 points against the New York Knicks. Only one local radio station broadcast the game, and only the fourth quarter call survives. The Library of Congress a few years ago added it to its National Recording Registry, which is pretty cool. Here's Bill Campbell, the announcer, with the climactic moment.
Rodgers throws long to Chamberlain. He's got it. He's trying to get up. He shoots. No good. The rebound, Luckenbill. Back to Chamberlain. He shoots up. No good. In and out. The rebound, Luckenbill. Back to Rucklick. Into Chamberlain. He made it. He made it. A different dunk. He made it. The fans are all over the floor. They stopped the game. People are running out on the court. 100 points for Wilt Chamberlain.
A dipper dunk. Wilt was the dipper, of course. It should also be noted that Wilt had been up all night partying with a lady friend in New York before, sleepless and hungover, taking an 8 a.m. train to Philadelphia and then the team bus to Hershey. I bring up Wilt because current NBA stars are scoring a lot of points. Just last week, Luka Doncic of Dallas had 73, tied for the fourth most in a game ever, and Joel Embiid of the 76ers had 70. Those were just the 14th and 15th 70-point games in league history, and Donovan Mitchell and Damian Lillard recorded the 12th and 13th last season. Ben Golliver also is a volume shooter. He covers the NBA for the Washington Post and co-hosts the NBA podcast, Greatest of All Talk. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Stefan.
So what's up with this spate of ridiculous individual scoring games? Statistical anomalies, or are we looking at a trend?
Well, it's definitely a trend, and I'll lay out why. But I think even more than that, I want to sell this hard. This, to me, feels like we're reaching kind of a moment for the soul of the game, the soul of the NBA game, because what we've seen over these last 10 years, and I use that framework because, 2015 was the first year of the Golden State Warriors championship run where they really changed how basketball was played professionally, has seen a number of major structural changes to the sport that has led to these gigantic scoring performances, and in my opinion has potentially turned off some viewers, or at least led to a debate about whether this is healthy for the NBA. So just some quick stats. First of all, 10 years ago, the average score for each team in a game was 101. That's now up to 115. All right. The average number of three-pointers attempted 10 years ago was 22. That's now up to 35. The average number of possessions in a game 10 years ago was 94. That's now up to 99. You look at the average for the leading scorer in the NBA 10 years ago was 32. That's now up to 36. And you look at the number of players who averaged 25 points in a game 10 years ago, there was only 5. Now there's 18, almost one on every single team, right? So there's clear inflation all across the board. And three things are driving it. I mean, first of all, more three-pointers, obviously. Steph Curry makes a bunch. They win titles. Everybody wants to shoot a lot of three-pointers. The second thing has been pace of play. I think for teams with less talent, they realize to try to increase the randomness to get up and down the court. You've got to play faster to try to beat teams with better talent. And you've seen that become, part of the pace and space era, as it's described. And the third thing is the consolidation of the ball with superstar players. We've seen usage rates among the very best players really uptick. They're just getting the ball more often. It's become this efficient way to score. So players like Joel Embiid and Luka Doncic have a way greener light than maybe the stars of even 10 years ago, and certainly compared to 20 years ago. So the good aspects of this development is, typically people do like scoring. It's fun to go watch these games. It's fun to be able to say, hey, I saw somebody score 50 points. I saw someone score 70 points. It generates some social media buzz. But I do wonder if kind of the other shoe has dropped here, because we've had 4 70-point games here since last January, 5 since 2017. In the previous 20 years, Kobe Bryant was the only person who reached that threshold. And it's one of those deals where, everybody likes cake, but nobody eats cake for dinner every single night. And has the NBA kind of gorged itself on this scoring boom where you're not seeing television ratings explode along with the scoring? Have people gotten maybe, a little tuned out, I guess, to the excitement? When Booker had 70 points in 2017, that was like a week-long story in the NBA. Luka scored 73, I think, on Friday night. And I'm glad you guys are still talking about it on Monday, but most of everybody else in the sports world has certainly moved on to Taylor Swift and whatever else is going on, right?
Well, I'm just sort of curious. So from what you just said, players have gotten so much more efficient in scoring. They're so much more skilled. The best players have the ball more, which seems to be a good thing. But also, people seem to be complaining about it, to your point. Like, as soon as those games were over, you could go on social media and you would see people, oh, this is, blah, blah, blah. So you've seen these games. Like, aesthetically, what do they look like? Because you think it's great if Luka Doncic had the ball all goddamn time. Like, that seems like you'd rather that than, like, somebody else, but it doesn't seem like it's translating into more beautiful ball. But what have you seen out of this then?
Well, all those developments I'm describing, the more three-pointers, the faster play, the consolidating the ball with the star players, are all smart developments. Those are really intelligent general managers crunching numbers, often turning to analytics and deciding this is the best way for us to play, to rack up wins, and it as a byproduct to have star players score lots of points. The counter to those trends, though, has been how defenses act in the NBA, right? So now you have to cover a lot more different distance side to side as opposed to just protecting the paint. Now you're pulling out your big men on the perimeter and asking them to guard guards more often and to contest three-point shots more often than they used to have to do. So you've seen kind of a change in the shape of NBA players. Now you get guys like Jonas Valanciunas, who are the big, traditional, big-bodied centers, and those guys are sort of last of a dying breed, right? The younger centers look maybe more like Onyeka Okongwu from the Atlanta Hawks, where they're very thin, very mobile. They're moving all over the court. They're not asked to do as many things physically as defensive players were 10 years ago. So when you're stretching defenses to the side and away from the basket, you're creating a lot more easy opportunities in the paint. And for talented scorers like Luka and Joel Embiid, you're also creating a lot more opportunities for those guys to get fouled by defenders that can't handle them, right? So it's no coincidence at all that these guys are shooting 10, 15, sometimes 20 free throws in their biggest scoring outputs. So that's why I say it's a soul of the game moment for the NBA. You guys remember, kind of after Jordan retired, how ugly the games were. There's no exciting players. And so the NBA came in and kind of legislated excitement into the game by saying you can't hand check anymore. We're going to have more freedom of movement. We're going to try to increase the offense's ability to score so we don't get NBA Finals games that are like, 90 to 86, right? Nobody's tuning in, nobody's watching. And I think the NBA needs to step in here and rein the offense back in a little bit. I don't know if, 116 to 1, on the average, that's just too high, because that means you're getting a lot of 130s, a lot of 140s. And I don't think fans, love that style of play. I would bring up the idea that when the scores reach that high, you're more likely to have blowouts. You're more likely to get, say, the Boston Celtics versus the Miami Heat last Thursday, where Boston wins by 30 points. And there's more people watching LSU's women's basketball team, which I'm sure Josh loved, than we're watching that major showdown of the Eastern Conference finalists, right? So I think if you're reining scoring back in, you're probably going to get more competitive games than you've had recently. You're probably going to lose some of these big scoring nights in the process, but hopefully you're getting a game where you've got more two-way competition and the defense has a chance. Because right now, on a lot of nights, including Luka's scoring night, the defense didn't have a chance. You watch the highlights. I mean, in some cases, it feels like they're not even trying. And I think the NBA should be the ones who kind of restore that balance.
Well, one factor that you didn't mention is that there's a handful, I think 5, of historically bad teams this year. And many of these scoring performances have come against those historically bad teams. And a lot of the reason why they're bad is that they play no defense. The Hawks I guess, are more of like a middle tier team, but they offered no resistance to Luka in that game that I saw. But, and then there's the other factor, which I don't think you mentioned either, which is that players are better now than they've ever been in terms of offensive skill. And so when you have that combination of, on certain nights, maybe Kyrie Irving isn't playing, maybe Anthony Edwards is sick, and so you have one superstar player soaking up all of the offense in a game against a historically bad team, then I think you might see a historic output. But I don't know, Ben. I mean, it seems like these regular season games, like I tuned in to the fourth quarter of the Luka game and of the Embiid game and of the Cat game because I wanted to see if they were going to put up a record scoring amount. They got one more viewer than they would have otherwise
for
good. Wolves, Hornets, Mavs, Hawks, whatever. Do you think that maybe a kind of all-in-one solution here is make the regular season shorter? That way, every game takes on a little more importance. Maybe every team plays harder. Maybe you don't get a situation where Embiid sits out against Jokic in Denver for the fourth or fifth straight season. Because otherwise, I'm finding it hard to feel like lament, oh man, if only this like Hornets-Wolves game would have been like 95-93. That would have been so much better for the NBA.
No, there's a sweet spot in between where I think that you're accomplishing both goals in my mind. I think that if you have games in the 105 to 115 range on most nights, you're probably okay. When you're getting the 130s, I do think you're getting people to tune out, and it just, they roll their eyes. I remember there was a huge burst of excitement around the Warriors when they first started putting up these amazing scoring performances because it was really pretty basketball, because Steph Curry was so fun. But you look at the ratings, it's been in a dramatic, I don't want to call it free fall, but it's been noticeably down since that initial excitement around them. I don't only want to blame the weak sisters of the poor and the San Antonio Spurs here, though, because don't forget, Cat, his 62-point game, they lost, right? You look at Devin Booker's 70-point game, his team lost. And this is not always just a function of, you're beating up on terrible teams. I think that defense is definitely harder. I also don't like this argument that, it's just so many talented players in the NBA now, so we have to just assume that this will happen all the time. Yes, every once in a while, but you look at playoff scoring, for example, when teams are really locked in and trying, the numbers are significantly lower for team scoring, for individual scoring in the playoffs than they are during the regular season. We haven't seen one of these 70-point performances, in the playoffs, because you're going to see adjustments. You're going to see teams take it more seriously. The length of the schedule is the most compelling point because what the NBA said, and they know they've got a problem with the regular season because one of their executives, Joe Dumars, came out in October and said, look, this is an 82-game regular season. We expect everybody to play hard every single night, and we expect you to be out there if you're a star-level player and not skip games like Embiid did. And I think what happens when that's your approach, if you can't manage your energy and your ability on a night-to-night basis anymore because you're no longer allowed to take off nights per NBA league rules, you tend to manage your energy within a game. And I think there's a slight degradation in the quality of those games, and usually that comes through on the defensive end. So I just think it's become a little bit too easy for scorers. The Hawks played terrible defense. The Spurs didn't even really seem to make too many adjustments against Embiid. They were just fine with it. And I don't like to see that. I want to see some pushback. And I think the NBA could change some of their rules, specifically around the amount of contact that's allowed in the paint and around the basket area. So many more fouls are called in those situations in NBA games compared to FIBA tournaments or the Olympics. And it doesn't need to be like that. You can allow a more physical game. You can allow defenders to get away with more. You could potentially change the illegal defense rules to allow teams a little bit more freedom in terms of how they protect the paint. All of those things could maybe give defenses a better chance right now, because at this point on the average NBA game, they're just completely overwhelmed.
Josh, you mentioned that Embiid sat out against the Nuggets a few days ago, and it was a late scratch. They said there was something wrong with him, but it looked like that might have been a good game for them to take off. Tyrese Maxey and Tobias Harris were already out. Embiid could have used a blow, it sounds like. And not great for the league. Marquee matchup, fan audience. You're right about that, Ben. I mean, people would not be tuning into that game once they heard that Embiid wasn't playing.
I DVR'd the game, and then when I heard Embiid didn't play in it, I deleted it off my DVR without watching it.
Does that count as watching it if you've actually recorded it? Does the NBA get that click? So Embiid sitting out during what is one of the greatest seasons since Wilt in 1961-62. He may not even qualify for the MVP award because of a new NBA rule saying that you got to play 65 games. I mean, Ben, does any of that matter? I mean, are the Sixers right to just manage Joel Embiid the way they can? If Joel Embiid doesn't care about winning the MVP, who cares? Their goal is to do better in the playoffs than they've done historically.
So I thought Embiid had an almost unhealthy obsession with winning the MVP last year. I mean, he was doing tons of interviews. It was a real media campaign. And given that he had never won anything in the playoffs before, it's like, hey, man, like, are you putting the cart before the horse here? Are you caring a little bit too much about your individual accomplishments rather than your team's success? Once he won the MVP after finishing a close second a couple of times, and once his team struggled in the playoffs, it felt like he came back this year with a totally different tune. I mean, he said it after he scored 70. He's like, look, this doesn't matter. It's cool to be up there with Wilt, but what really matters is team success. So I loved hearing that from Embiid. And I think Philadelphia's best chance at getting that kind of team success is managing Embiid's season, whether the NBA allows that or disallows that. We should point out he banged knees, I think it was a night or 2 nights before that Denver game, and he was down on the court in some significant pain. I feel like the real error here was almost like a paperwork deal for Philadelphia. They should have listed him on their injury report coming out of that game, knowing that he had banged knees, knowing that he had been in pain. And that way, if they did need to scratch him, you know, there's a paper trail saying like, look, this guy is dealing with something. What really upset everybody was that he was not on the injury report. Everyone assumed we were getting this major showdown until like 15 minutes before tip-off. And so if you're, let's say, gambling on this game, if you're like Josh, you've DVR'd the game, everyone has this anticipation built up. And then it's just like, sorry, we're ripping this away from you. It's a terrible look for the league. I'm sure they will investigate the circumstances around that. I would not be surprised at all if the 76ers are fined for that situation. There are allowances in some cases, you know, for things happening right before the game, because sometimes things do happen before a game. Remember when Wembanyama sprained his ankle on the ball boy's foot? Like, there's no way for the Spurs to have known that was going to happen, right? But this felt a little bit different, and I think it will draw the wrath of the league office. If this one doesn't, I don't know what would be a very clear violation of their new policy around player participation. So hopefully they crack down on that one.
You know, Ben, so many people were complaining about, Embiid not playing that it's sort of, I almost forgot that the Lakers and the Warriors were going to play after that. And I mean, it seems to have been, it had the elements of everything that people, it was a high scoring game, old stars, like not the young stars of the league. And like it ended really late too, right? Because it was the West Coast.
Ben didn't see the end of the game because once the teams passed 110 points, he just turned it off in disgust.
It's like, this is outrageous. This is outrageous. This is not basketball. But no, I mean, I'm just sort of curious. Like, so did you think that game, like that Bron-Steph rivalry, the latest edition of it, is that actually good for the NBA? Because it seemed like that was high quality, closely contested basketball, even though like clearly the scoring got a little out of control there.
So I actually did see the game, and Stefan will appreciate this. My mom was in town, so I was playing Scrabble against my mom, who's unreal. She's not on your level, but she's definitely above my level, while watching, in my lap, the overtime periods of the Warriors-Lakers. Look, nobody complains about 130 games when it's 130, 128, and every single possession late is close. And certainly I wouldn't be complaining about the show those guys put on. Steph with some amazing threes. You could tell his frustration coming off of the court. But this is almost another kind of question for the NBA is, how long can LeBron and Steph carry this thing, right? Like when every time you have these major weekend showcase games, invariably it feels like it's the Lakers or the Warriors. And in some cases, it's the Lakers versus the Warriors, right? And so that does feel like a little bit of an issue. You look at the number of under 30, especially American stars in this year's All-Star game. I mean, you've got Tyrese Halliburton as a starter. I mean, it's just a very short list of guys who are there kind of ready to take the, to take the reins from the LeBron, the Steph, and the, Kevin Durant generation. And, I do think, for the NBA, they really have to start thinking, forward looking about where does this go for the next 5 to 10 years? Because if scoring's at 115 right now, Do they want it to be 120 in 5 years? Do they want it to be 125 in 5 years? At what point do they look at, kind of the television interest that's been generated and say, like, we're not even close to where we thought they would be, back when people were saying, the NBA should be a real challenge for football. I do think the ratings would go up if there was fewer games because the games would feel more special. I think the games would go up if we had more two-way tension like I was describing earlier. I think people would be more invested in that. And I do think the playoff product for the NBA is actually still excellent. Very rarely do you usually get complete duds, especially when you're out of the first round of the playoffs. That's when the competition level is raised the highest, when the energy level is the highest. But what I think we've learned here during this season where the NBA has tried to force players to be out there every single night is they can't maintain the type of competitive intensity that we're hoping for 82 times a year before the playoffs. It's just an unrealistic ask, and something has to give.
All right, very quickly, Ben, can someone score 101 points in a game in the NBA?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely. And I would not have said that 3 or 4 years ago. But at this point, why would I think that was impossible? All the trends are saying if you're going to be chasing it as desperately as the Timberwolves chased 62 for Cat, where they turned their entire game plan over and wound up costing them the game. I think it's totally possible. You can imagine a situation where a guy comes out and has 60 at halftime and his team, goes after it with sole focus. And, I'm actually a little bit afraid of that happening. I'm not ready for it. I grew up thinking 100 was untouchable, and it definitely is not any longer.
Cat did break Roger Maris's record with 62, so there was that. Ben Golliver covers the NBA for the Washington Post. You can listen to more of him on Greatest of All Talk, to which you should subscribe. Ben, thanks a lot for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, and automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations, so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. Now it is time for After Balls, sponsored by Bennett's Prune Juice, endorsed by Kenny Sailors, who says it was okay. The first Grand Slam on the tennis calendar is complete, so now I'm going to grace you/bore you with my thoughts. On the women's side, Aryna Sabalenka of Belarus won her second straight Australian Open and second major overall, beating China's Qinwen Zhang in straight sets in the final. The tournament was pretty much a total romp for Sabalenka, who won 6 of her 7 matches by the following scorelines: 6-0, 6-1, 6-3, 6-2, 6-0, 6-0, the double bagel, 6-3, 6-2, 6-2, 6-3, and in the final, 6-3, 6-2. The one exception, her semifinal match against Coco Gauff, where the still teenage American served for the first set before losing 7-6 in that first set and 6-4 in the second. That match was a disappointment for Coco by her own admission. She's coming off her first major win at the U.S. Open and came into the season looking a lot physically stronger, and she was armed with an improved serve after working a bit with America's last male Grand Slam winner, Andy Roddick. But Coco's serve and her occasionally bulky forehand both let her down against Sabalenka, who she had beaten in that U.S. Open final. Gauff had 8 double faults and just 4 forehand winners in the whole match, compared to Sabalenka at 19. And Sabalenka at the moment has the best serve forehand combo on tour. But these things can change very quickly. In 2022, Sabalenka had 428 double faults on the season. That was more than 100 more than anyone else on the women's tour. She got that straightened out, and now she's right up at the top of the rankings with Iga Swiatek. I actually came away from the semifinal last week more optimistic about Coco's short and long-term prospects, given that she was able to hang so close to a player who's on a dominant run, despite really not playing well in that match. Then on the men's side, I want to start with the semifinals, where the big results of the tournament was Jannik Sinner beating Novak Djokovic, who had won 5,000 Australian Opens in a row, had a match winning streak of more than 30, only interrupted by that whole COVID vaccine situation that I think we might remember. Djokovic didn't really look like himself all tournament. He would profess to be sick. I'm not sure what was going on with that. But Sinner is 22 years old. Italian's been a kind of up-and-comer for the last few years, just imposed his will on Djokovic in a way that we haven't seen on the Grand Slam level in a really long time. And I'm going to make a kind of broad general statement that I think Joel will agree with here. Djokovic won 3 Grand Slams last year. He's, zoomed past Federer and Nadal. But I think when you look back at certain dominant athletes' careers, you wouldn't have guessed when their last championship was or when their last title was, unless it's like a Michael Jordan case where it's like explicitly a last dance. Like I'm not saying it's likely or even, probable, but it's possible that Djokovic will never win another Grand Slam title again. I mean, I think it's looking extremely likely that the next great rivalry in tennis will be Jannik Sinner versus Carlos Alcaraz. They already played an unbelievable match at the U.S. Open where Sinner had a match point. Alcaraz came back to win and then won his first Grand Slam at that U.S. Open. Sinner's incredibly charismatic guy, likable guy, charming guy, redhead. There was, in the final against Daniil Medvedev, he was serving for the match in the 5th set after coming back from 2 sets down, and they showed a woman in the crowd like kissing a carrot as like a talisman. I think it was a stuffed carrot, but his fans are like really into carrots because of his red hair. And then finally, winding my way towards our Afterball name, there was a sign in the crowd, Sinner, carrot dinner. So, in celebration and in praise of Jannik Sinner, who beat Daniil Medvedev, who beat Alexander Zverev in the semis. Joel Anderson, what is your Sinner, carrot dinner?
I really thought we were going to go with Carrot Top there, but my Sinner, what is it again? Sinner.
Carrot dinner.
Carrot dinner. All right. My Sinner, carrot dinner. So a few hours before the opening kickoff to Championship Sunday, I set out with my wife, Janae, who some Slate readers may already know as Dear Prudence, for a nice morning stroll with our 21-month-old son, Desmond. And we took a different route than usual, passing through our neighborhood's weekly farmer's market and walking somewhat aimlessly until we arrived at a playground that we rarely visit. We figured it would be a cool little change of plans for Desmond, who both appreciates our routines, but also gets bored by them pretty quickly. As we lifted Des out of his stroller, I saw what I usually see on weekend mornings in our little suburban bubble. Lots of little kids, lots of anxious parents, a scramble to claim tables for a birthday party, and not much open space on the climbers or slides. But Desmond is insistent and not nearly as worried about taking up space in public like his father. So I followed him up to the top, focused only on making sure he didn't topple over along the way. Then I looked down at the end of the slide, expecting to see Janae. Instead, staring right back at me, a thin little smile forming on his lips, was Andrew Luck. And I'm pretty sure I said, oh, shit. Hey, man, with a familiarity like I knew him or like he would know someone like me. And I was shocked. It was clear that he was a lot more used to this than I was. So for some context, I should say we see semi-famous people around here all the time. Once Condoleezza Rice was crossing the street with a friend. Another time I got to the barbershop early and Nick Bosa was in my chair. And our D.C. listeners would be tickled to know that I used to see former D.C. Mayor Adrian Fenty hanging out around the Stanford Business School. But Andrew Luck is different, at least to me. And I assume most of our listeners remember Andrew Luck. He was one of the NFL's best quarterbacks until he abruptly retired 2 weeks before the start of the 2019 season. He was 29 years old, cutting short a career that many had expected would someday end with him playing in a couple of Super Bowls and then into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And it was a devastating day for the Indianapolis Colts and the NFL. The NFL had seen a number of surprise early retirements in recent years, most of them for some of the same reasons Luck gave when he announced his retirement. But nobody of his stature and with so much potentially left to accomplish in the game had walked away so soon. So here's some of what he said at his retirement announcement.
For the last 4 years or so, I've been in this cycle of injury, pain, rehab. And it's been unceasing and unrelenting, both in season, and off season. And I've felt stuck in it. And the only way I see out is to to no longer play football. It's taken my joy of this game away, and this. Sorry.
This isn't a visual medium, but Luck looked like he felt at that podium, a sad, thoroughly beaten man. And that's not the man I saw at the end of that slide Sunday. He somehow appeared younger, like maybe 20 pounds lighter, had a little stubble on his cheeks and chin. And I'm pretty sure he was wearing a windbreaker that read Palo Alto High School, where he's now an assistant football coach. When I snapped out of my stupor, I think I managed to say something like, "Hey man, nice to meet you. I'm Joel, and I'm also from Houston." He said, "Oh yeah, what part of town?" I told him, and he even said it back like a real native. "Mo City." Our kids eyed each other, but kept on about their business like toddlers pretty much do. He explained, straight-faced, that his daughter was selling ice cream, gesturing to her imaginary shop under the play structure. I got Desmond to say hi. We talked about how our wives preferred this wonderful Bay Area morning chill to the stuffy climate back home. And then my actual wife showed up over my left shoulder. And what happened next is something I would actually like to apologize for. I wanted to explain who Andrew Luck was to Janae, and this is what happened. I tried to refer back to the evening of his announcement, which still remains weirdly vivid to me. On the afternoon that Luck retired, Janae and I were out in downtown Palo Alto, a date night, if you will. And when I heard the news about Luck retiring mid-dinner, I couldn't get over it. I just kept talking about it and checking on my phone. And eventually Janae allowed me to sit down at a sports bar and obsess over the coverage for a little bit. And maybe it was because of the magnitude of his retirement. Maybe it's because it truly seemed to come out of nowhere. Maybe it's because we were not even a mile away from his old college campus, and I expected others to be sharing in my shock. Or maybe, as Josh pointed out yesterday, it's because I quit football too, and I felt a sort of kinship with him, though he was approximately millions of times more successful at it than me. So I was actually trying to explain that moment to Janae in front of Andrew Luck. But when I realized that my explanation was as bad as my timing, I shut it down and I said, "That's the QB I was telling you about who was really great and from out here." I really hope Andrew Luck isn't used to that, being defined by what he used to do. And I'm legitimately sorry to have immediately picked from one of the lowest moments in his career, instead of just saying, "This is Andrew. He used to go to Stanford." She later told me she wasn't really paying attention and assumed I was introducing a fellow sports writer or someone I knew from Twitter. Except she wondered why I seemed a little nervous, as if I wanted him to like me. It's embarrassing, man. Come on. Anyway, we didn't talk much after that. Desmond wandered off and we followed. Luck stuck around a little bit longer and seemed to know everyone at the playground, or at least know them well enough that they didn't seem as geeked as I was to see him there. And maybe on that side of the neighborhood, they're used to being in the presence of a football player so good, he could have easily been playing in the championship game coming on a few hours later. But once we started the walk back home, I couldn't stop thinking about Andrew Luck and how he must have felt a couple hours before one of the biggest football days of the year. In Seth Wickersham's profile of Luck for ESPN in 2022, Luck talked a little more at length about his reasons for leaving. He said, "There are things I miss, but there are things that, one, I'm not willing to give up about my life now, and two, that I don't want to put myself through again." At the time, Luck was preparing to leave his home in Indianapolis to return to Palo Alto, home of his alma mater, Stanford. He said then that he planned to go back to graduate school and talked about coaching or teaching someday. He really wanted to make sure nothing came between him and his wife and his daughter again, and certainly not football. Now, I see he's living out his promises. Today, he's 34 and studying to get his master's in education from Stanford. He works a couple times a week with the quarterbacks and receivers at Palo Alto High School. And on the second biggest NFL Sunday of the year, Andrew Luck was at the playground trying to keep up with his kids like me and the rest of us. It didn't look like he was missing a single thing or worried about missing anything at all. He was just sitting comfortably in the sand, buying his kids imaginary ice cream, and he very much gave the impression of a guy who wasn't pressed to get back home to watch the games on Sunday. It seems like he's found the place he wants to be. So anyway, if I get to see you around town again, Andrew, I promise I won't bring up football again unless you do it first.
That was great. Stefan, what's your opening line when you see Andrew Luck at the playground?
You want to come on the podcast next week, Andrew?
Oh, man. Andrew, if you hear this, I mean, you are always welcome, buddy. I'm so sorry.
Really nice to meet you. I am also gangly and awkward. That would be my come on with like ill-kempt facial hair. I'm sure he gets that one a lot.
I'm sure he was dying to hear about your college football career, Joel.
I didn't want to talk about how TCU had beaten Stanford the last 2 times they played them, and that was even when Harbaugh was there. But we didn't have to get. I think we open the season with Stanford next year, TCU versus Stanford. So maybe I can get him to come over and we can, watch it at my house, or maybe I can watch it at his. Actually,
that was great, Joel.
But yeah, that was terrific.
Thanks, guys.
And we'll just come up with some material just so you're prepared in case you meet Toby Gerhart.
Yeah, I mean, please, guys, give me something. One time I met Chad Hutchison in town somewhere, but I kind of knew Chad Hutchison. But anyway, he's welcome too if we all get together. So
that is our show for today. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. Listen to past shows and subscribe or just reach out. Go to slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. For Joel Anderson and Stefan Fatsis, I'm Josh Levin. Remember Zalmo Beatty, and thanks for listening.